Think of the last game you quit playing. Maybe life got hectic and you simply didn't have enough time to keep playing. Maybe you played for a few hours and slowly decided, nope, this isn't for me. Or maybe there was a moment you suddenly and instantly decided, no, I'm not playing this anymore. As a games designer, identifying the quit moment means understanding why players stop playing your game. And it is probably the most important aspect of player-based growth and player retention. So let's examine some popular quit moments and then discuss what you, as a designer, could do about it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Josh Strife. Your time is valuable, it's finite, and game designers fight to get even a small amount of it. An hour, a day. In the case of MMORPGs, games designed to be played for weeks, months and years, games designers need to give you things to do, reasons to stay. But there is an equal and opposite side of game design, and that is the quit moment. The moment a player decides they no longer want to play your game, and understanding it is probably one of the most important parts of game design. So let's have a look at what you need to consider could be quit moments if you want to make a game.
Before we dive into this phenomenon, consider dropping a like on the video or subscribing to the channel for more gaming stuff. Ring the bell for all the future notifications, and as usual, a massive thank you to all the supporters on Patreon and Twitch who keep the channel going. More on this at the end. For now, let's begin. For your game to succeed, especially an MMORPG, you need to find and then keep players. And every step of the journey in buying a game, from hearing about it for the first time to visiting the shop or the website, paying, installing, downloading, launching, creating an account, or logging in, is a hurdle you as a games designer need to think about. Because players now have such an overwhelming choice of games, anything less than a super smooth journey is going to lose you players. For every single road bump in the entire process, for every second of delay or moment of annoyance, you will lose players. Every minor difficulty is a potential quit moment, and then later gameplay aspects are potential quit moments also. So let's look at the journey of a player and identify the major quit moments. Now, many of you might hear the quit moments I describe and instantly want to argue back, saying, oh, you wouldn't quit, or oh, you could just do X, Y, or Z instead, you could fix the problem, or how players who quit there are wimps or crybabies. And look, it's not about how well you can handle something. This is a discussion about general player retention. While we analyse these moments, we're leaving our own personal emotions out of it and identifying the problem areas for retention within design. A few days ago, I was trying to download Lord of the Rings Online for an episode of Worst MMO Ever. I downloaded the game from Steam, launched it, and it auto-minimised itself. It did not work first try. Now, I have a lot of patience and I'm going to try and fix it, but this right here is a quit moment. If your game doesn't launch instantly and smoothly, there's a lot of players who will simply delete and move on. Now personally, I re-downloaded from the main website. I did some troubleshooting, I read some forums, reinstalled some Windows frameworks, even downloaded and ran DirectX drivers from June 2010 because the game doesn't work with DirectX 12. I ran every executable in these files in various compatibility modes. I spent 5 hours trying to make this work and it didn't. And that was my quit moment.
Gaben, the guy behind Steam, once said that piracy is not necessarily an issue of price, it's an issue of accessibility and availability. People want to take the path of least resistance to play a game. If they could download a game for free, but they have to go through a complex series of downloading hacks and patches and port forwarding and changing it around, or they could just pay £5 to get the game to work immediately, most people are actually going to pay the £5. People are lazy. They don't want to work hard to get the game they want to play to work. If you can provide a product in an easy, simple way, people will pay for that. Players want a smooth experience in gaming, and every single issue, every minute problem that a player faces, from the moment they hear about your game to the moment they start playing it, is a potential lost player.
So let's imagine you've downloaded the game and played, say, a free trial, like Final Fantasy XIV, and now you decide to try and buy the game, to give them money. Well, in Final Fantasy XIV's case, this is far too complicated, with a convoluted payment process using websites that look like they were made in the late 90s. You'll need a Final Fantasy username, but also a Square Enix account, and buying the base game might not include game time, but buying expansions doesn't include the base game, and the time cards are separate. And look, giving Final Fantasy XIV money is a really hard process for an average player. This right here, another quit moment. I guarantee there are players who stopped playing the game because this system isn't as simple as it could be. And if you're responding saying, well, I figured it out, great. I'm glad you did. But if you were a games designer, would you actively choose to leave a system in the design, in the live service of the game, that could potentially lose you money? So let's say you've downloaded and paid and now you go to play and you log in and you have no idea what to do. That moment of complete directionless in any game, that overwhelming early game agency with no foundation or framework of what you might, possibly, could, should be doing, that's a quit moment. And it all comes back to the moment of feeling overwhelmed. The reason I'm a fan of tutorials integrated into the early game gameplay experience is because giving early game direction is the best way to teach all relevant mechanics you as a player will need, and then once the tutorial has done its job simply and effectively, you can release the player into a greater world knowing they will follow the skills you've given them. Warframe does this relatively well. The opening tutorial is fantastic, and when you're released onto the ship, suddenly the adventure line is dropped and your choices become overwhelming. If you've ever played Path of Exile, you probably had a great early game time, but try to remember how you felt the first time you opened the skill tree. I have friends who straight up told me they quit when they saw this screen. Now, you might love the screen, and that's because the Path of Exile skill system is fantastic. It's an incredibly complicated, remarkably deep, enjoyable system. There's nothing wrong with the system, but if you have players saying they quit when they saw how it was presented, there is definitely something wrong with the introduction to the system.
Now, I'm not saying remove complex systems from games, not at all. Games need complex systems, and it's interesting and valuable to the end game to have a lot of complexity. What I'm saying is they need to be introduced slowly, in a curated way, to not scare off your early game player. If you as a game designer have spent months creating this incredible system, you will have months of understanding of it, and it will probably require months of understanding to fully grasp. If you throw all this information at a new player, you're expecting them to take in months of information in one go. That's overwhelming. You can be proud of your in-depth system, but if you introduce it far too quickly, don't be surprised if a lot of new players, especially new gamers that have chosen your game as their first foray into gaming, get overwhelmed and leave.
But what if it's all going well so far? You've bought the game fine, it's downloaded and installed fine, it's launched, and the early game is really enjoyable and the learning curve is smooth and you're making constant progress. There's not been any single overwhelming moment yet. Imagine you play for a few hours, you gain some items, gain some power, and then you die to an enemy. If it's an unfair death, as in you were combo stun locked or one hit from off screen or the enemy has millions of times more health than you do, that's a quit moment. It sounds so simple when you say it out loud, but many younger designers forget that balancing your combat encounters to feel challenging while not being unfair is essential. So let's imagine you fight and you lose fairly. You respawn and all of your items and some of your experience is gone. That right there is a major quit moment for a huge amount of players. And I know, I can already see the YouTube comments from old EverQuest or Ultima players screaming about how modern day special Snowflake players aren't able to handle tough deaths or whining about losing items, but just think. The modern MMO player has often matured along with the gaming genre, and many MMO players have jobs, families and responsibilities outside of the game, and to put it simply, losing progress isn't as appealing as it was back when you were young. Invested time being lost isn't an enjoyable mechanic for a huge amount of players, and it is undoubtedly, whether you personally enjoy it or not, one of the most powerful quit moments in the MMO gameplay experience. I understand there are players who like this type of design. There is a market for a more hardcore, unforgiving experience. We're not discussing which is better. We're looking at identifiable moments in a gaming experience that will lose you players. Imagine playing an online game and suddenly you're attacked by other over-leveled players and killed, and all of your stuff is taken in an unfair, non-consensual moment of PvP. That is a moment a lot of players are going to quit. One major factor MMO designers often forget is time constraints. Yes, the MMO is a genre that can reward multi-hour long playing sessions, but if they are required, players simply won't log in. If a player only has 30 minutes to play and they think there's no point logging in, that is the potential birth of a future quit moment. I've asked people who play hardcore MMOs about the player base, and they've told me if you don't have several hours free a day, don't play this MMO, and then they wonder why months down the line the game is dying. Your player base need to know, even if they only have a short amount of time to play, it is still worth logging in. Because if it isn't, you are sitting on a quit moment time bomb.
It might sound like I'm just whining about game design that I don't personally like, but it's actually more objective than that. Identifying the quit moments is essential to maintaining your player base, especially in an MMORPG. The first M is massively, and if you want to have a massive player base, it's about finding why players stop playing. What are the quit moments, and how can you remove them?
An overwhelming starting area with no direction or framework given to a player. An unbalanced PvP experience. A blatant and obtrusive pay-to-win cash shop thrust into your face. Awkward or uncustomizable controls or key bindings. Public opinion of your company turning bad. Individuals linked to the game being revealed to be questionable people. Even a lack of players caused by so many previous players quitting. All of these and more are quit moments, and they are what is harming your game. Every single moment the player has any interaction or experience with your game, even if they aren't playing it, even if they're just hearing about it, downloading it, installing it, or launching it for the first time, or if they're playing it for the 1000th hour, has the potential to become a quit moment. You ever heard someone say, "I'm not going to play that game because," and then they give a reason? That's a quit moment before they even begin. I'm not playing Eve because it's just spreadsheets in space. I'm not playing The Elder Scrolls Online because I've been told the combat is bad. I'm not playing Final Fantasy XIV because it takes too long to finish. I'm not playing RuneScape because the graphics are old. Quit moments don't just affect your current player base. They actually damage your potential player base too, because they prevent new players joining. So let's imagine a perfect scenario of easy to buy, easy to play, and a feeling of challenge and fair balanced combat and a genuinely fun experience. Then let's say life gets hectic and you don't log in for a few days, or a few weeks, or a few months, and then you return to the game and you can't remember what you're doing, or what your skills or abilities do, or how your class plays. That moment right there is a quit moment felt by a returning player. I want you to remember the last time you tried to return to an RPG, whether that's an online MMO or an offline single-player game, and you logged into an old character or an old save and you just didn't remember what you were doing. So you run around the familiar world with the familiar-looking UI and the familiar-sounding music, but the actual experience feels so unfamiliar. Like you're an observer watching an avatar explore, instead of a player being engaged and exploring with your avatar. Have you ever returned to a game you've left for a while and felt a heavy distance between you and the screen? Like you're watching a stranger in a strange land instead of your character in your game. That feeling is one of the slowest, most creeping quit moments you can have. The moment you realise the emotion's gone and you're playing because of familiarity and sunk cost. If life got hectic and you return to your favourite game only to feel something's not the same, that is the overwhelming moment we talked about earlier. That feeling of, where am I? What am I doing? How do my skills work again? This is how new players feel being greeted by too much too soon. Now imagine people feeling that as they log on for the first time. That empty feeling of loneliness when you return to an old RPG because you just cannot understand or remember what you need to do. That's how overwhelmed players feel. That's why people quit. Oh, quick side note about returning to old classic games. I'll be launching a new channel called Josh Strife Plays, where I review and critique old video games voted on by you, from the SNES era up to now. Imagine it just like this channel for reviews, but with all types of genres and not just MMOs. Link in the description if that's something you'd be interested in.
I spent 5 hours trying to make Lord of the Rings Online work, and I couldn't. That's definitely a quit moment for some people. When I returned to Neverwinter, a game I've loved for many, many years, I discovered that I'm no longer powerful. All of my stats have been reset and all my equipment is worthless. That's definitely a quit moment for a returning player. If I were to play Path of Exile the moment I see the skill tree, I personally like the idea of theory crafting the best, but I'm completely aware that is a quit moment for a vast majority of players. It's not about removing these systems. It's not about only adding things in I like. It's about finding a way to introduce the systems in your game that maintain and retain the maximum amount of players.
If you're making a game, or you're interested in game design, identify the quit moment. Find the reason players stop, or don't continue when they try to return. Then ask yourself why. Figure out how to change the design to remove the quit moment. The more quit moments you can remove, from purchase to install to account creation to gameplay, the longer your player base will grow and thrive. The healthiest, most successful long-term games don't necessarily have the best gameplay or the best mechanics or even the best graphics. They simply have the fewest quit moments. But what do you think? What made you quit a game last? What needs to change about your favourite game to stop new players quitting before they get a chance to become old players? Leave a comment down below. Thank you for watching. Another massive thank you to the supporters on Patreon and Twitch who keep the channel going. You can support from only £1 a month. Check the video description for links to the Patreon, Twitch, Twitter, Discord, and the new channel Strife Plays. And as always, have a great day.